Look, we'll start with the Ohio one. Some people are very confused about what it meant, what the implications are. They were voting on a measure that would have raised the threshold to change the Constitution later on.
Yeah, exactly. So it was an amendment to the Constitution, which could itself pass by just majority vote, that would prohibit future amendments to the Constitution from even being proposed unless they met a much higher signature threshold, and then couldn't be passed unless it reached a 60% voting threshold. And it was basically put on there by pro-lifers who think they're going to lose on the coming abortion referendum in Ohio unless they made it more difficult for it to make the ballot and made it more difficult for it and required supermajority approval. Effectively, what that would do is shift power from the people to the state legislature and the governor's chair. And I was not J.D. Vance. A lot of conservatives were for it. I was not. I don't think shifting power to the legislature is a good idea in general. I prefer power be in the hands of the people as often and as much and as frequently as possible. And Ohioans agreed with me. It was about a 22-point drop off from the Trump margin. It not only failed, it didn't even get close to passing.
Yeah, I think it was like 57-43, give or take.
Yeah, exactly. So about a 22 point. And if you looked at working class areas, the drop off was even bigger, for at least from the Trump vote margins, 25 points, sometimes 30-point drop offs. It wasn't primarily driven by Democrats rejecting it in that sense. It was driven by independent and working class Republican voters they read it and they're like, why do I want to take away my own power and give it to politicians instead? It was a short-term solution by people who think they have a current edge with the legislature over the voters. And I thought, if you're pro-life, go out and persuade people of your position. Don't rely on procedural tricks to try to deny people their ability to vote on it because you don't think you can persuade people.
And I guess the idea is if they pass a bad abortion law or one that people don't like, you can just, I don't know, abolish it or pass another one with the same majority. But this was like amending the shareholder agreement so that it, for all future decisions, makes it harder for good and for bad.
And anyone who's ever been through those shareholder agreements, you impose any supermajority rule, you're inviting problems. That's just the short answer. I mean, what it effectively did is shift power from the people directly to the legislature, because this didn't restrict at all. This didn't require the legislature to have a 60% vote to pass legislation. It was only the voters have to have a 60% vote. And so all it did was, hey, let's give more power to the legislature because we, the pro-life community, have an edge there that we don't think we have an edge with the majority of voters. It was an anti-democratic path and an anti-populist path, quite frankly. And so I was never in favor of it. It was short-sighted in its perspective that long-term they would have probably regretted.
Got the majority for now, or the edge for now on a specific issue, and then they might not have it on another issue, and then get stuck with the legislation that I can think of a number that would be problematic. Okay, so interesting, and that it's dead in the water. Do they try to revamp it? Like, do they do what we did in Quebec, just keep having referendums until they succeed?
I mean, I don't think so. It lost so badly. I think they'll give up on that at this point and realize they need to shift into how can we win on the abortion issue itself. The reality is most voters favor reasonable limits on abortion. They don't favor complete bans, but they do favor reasonable limits. Mm-hmm. Focus there. There's a part of the pro-life community that doesn't. I mean, I understand. I mean, they think life, a human soul, a human person within the meaning of the Constitution begins at the moment of conception. And so for them, there's no negotiation whatsoever. It's just a position that 75% of Americans reject. So, that they have a political problem. They have not been able to persuade people of that belief. It's just not sufficiently universal for it to succeed. So what they can focus on is where there is majority support, which is pretty much any abortion after the first trimester is unpopular. And you can ban most of those. You can ban all of them, frankly. And you can ban some that happen beforehand if it's being done for discriminatory reason. If you have people seeking abortions because of for eugenist, Richard Hanania loving kind of reasons, eugenicist reasons. For people who don't know, Richard Hanania is a eugenicist, just in case you don't know. We interviewed him in the past when he was not admitting he was a eugenicist and suggested he was something else.
What is a eugenicist?
Someone who believes in eugenics, who believes in getting rid of certain populations. Bill
Okay.
Gates is a eugenicist. He partially disguises it, but just watch a 60 Minutes interview with him and Melinda Gates, where they're walking through an African village, and the CBS guy, 60 Minutes guy, says, "Can you imagine these people having too many kids, having more kids? Why was he concerned about that in an African village?"